Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to the daily Hindu News Analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to cover today. I have chosen 4 important articles which are more relevant from a mains point of view, and we have plenty of prelims related articles in today's newspaper. Usually the Sunday newspaper is slightly different from the other days. The Hindu carries many interesting articles. So I have chosen a total of 9 important articles that are useful for both prelims and mains. Stay with me for the next 60 to 70 minutes. I promise to cover all these topics in complete detail. All you have to do is support us back by pressing that like button, share your comments once the session ends, and do subscribe to the channel. So let's begin with today's discussion by looking at the first article. In the front page of the Delhi edition, the Hindu carries an article that refers to the visit of Prime Minister Modi to the United Arab Emirates. After completing his historic visit to France, PM Modi has visited United Arab Emirates as well for one day before heading back towards India. This is a landmark visit because this is the 5th time that Prime Minister Modi has visited the UAE. I hope you know where UAE is located. If not, I'll show you the map and I'll help you understand where exactly UAE is located and why is it important for India. A few important agreements have been signed yesterday between India and UAE, and that is why the topic becomes extremely important. In fact, in Indian foreign policy, the United Arab Emirates has been given a lot of priority in the last few years. Today, both the countries share very close political, strategic, and economic relations. Hence, the topic is extremely important for your prelims and mains. So let's understand this comprehensively, beginning with the location of UAE. If you observe the map, you can see that the United Arab Emirates is a Gulf country located near the Persian Gulf. It opens towards the Persian Gulf, which is the hub of global oil exporting countries. It also shares an opening towards the Hormuz Strait over here between Iran and UAE, which is a strategic choke point. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow opening connecting the Persian Gulf with the Arabian Sea. So it's one of the most important shipping lanes in the world as it is critical for global oil supplies. All your major oil exporting countries are present in and around the Persian Gulf, and UAE is one amongst them. It's a Sunni majority country, a monarchy, a conservative country as well, and one of the top leading powers of the Sunni world, along with Saudi Arabia. So having good relations with such an important power in the Gulf is extremely crucial for Indian interests. Because to begin with, India's economic stability and our energy security is tied to our relations with these Gulf countries. From Iraq to Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, all these Persian Gulf countries are extremely important for India, primarily for our energy security. And the UAE is one of the top energy suppliers to India since many decades. And as of last year, India imported crude oil worth close to $18 billion from the United Arab Emirates. From this data, you can understand how important UAE is for India's energy security. In fact, before the Russia-Ukraine war began, before we started procuring the cheap Russian oil, prior to that, the UAE was the 3rd biggest oil supplier to India after Iraq and Saudi Arabia. In most of the years, Iraq is the top oil supplier to India, followed by Saudi Arabia. And the 3rd top supplier was UAE. It accounted for nearly 10% of our total oil imports. But since last 1 year, these dynamics have changed slightly because Russia has emerged as the 2nd biggest supplier to India in the last 1.5 years. As Russia has been hit with Western sanctions, India bypassed the sanctions and started purchasing the discounted Russian oil. As India has lifted most of the Russian oil exports, For a short period, Russia has become the second top supplier. Otherwise, usually Saudi Arabia is the second biggest supplier, followed by UAE at the third position. So this helps you understand how important this relationship is with this important Gulf country. It has also supported the Indian Strategic Petroleum Reserve Project, which is a key project for India to build a buffer stock, where India is building strategic underground storage areas to store enough crude oil, which will give India a buffer stock of at least 10 days to 1 month. At strategic locations like Mangaluru in Karnataka, Udupi again in Karnataka, then Visakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh, and in few other places in Gujarat, Odisha and Rajasthan as well. These strategic petroleum reserves are coming up. These are massive underground storage facilities where crude oil can be stored. Big powers like US, China, they all have created such buffer stocks which will help them sustain their economy for 1 month or even 2 months without any external oil supplies. For countries like India, which are heavily dependent on oil imports, such strategic petroleum reserves are crucial to build a buffer stock. And we have already completed phase 1 of the project, which has given us a buffer of at least 10 days worth of oil supplies. In phase 2, India is planning to scale this up to create a buffer stock of at least 1 month of oil supplies. And UAE is one of the key supporters of this project. Along with Saudi Arabia, it has been supplying reliable and cheap oil to India so that we can fill up our strategic petroleum reserves. Apart from this close energy dependency, India is also extremely interested in the UAE because we have a very strong Indian community in this country. The Indian diaspora in UAE is around 3.8 million strong. You have close to 40 lakh Indians residing and working in this country, and they form the backbone of UAE's economy. Most of the Indian workers who work in the Gulf countries, they are blue-collared workers who are semi-skilled laborers working in construction, oil industry, real estate, hospitality, etc. So a lot of Indians find employment opportunities here, and they contribute tremendously to build a strong cultural relationship between India and UAE. They also send back precious remittances back to their families in India. In fact, the Gulf region entirely accounts for more than 50% of the total remittances that we get. I hope you know that India has started receiving more than $100 billion in remittances in the last 1.5 to 2 years. Out of this, more than 50% of it comes from the Gulf region alone. Almost $50 billion plus is received by India as inward remittances from the Gulf countries. And out of that, UAE is the biggest contributor. In the Gulf region, UAE is the biggest contributor of remittances to India. This is crucial for the Indian economy to build up our foreign exchange reserves and to match our current account deficit. So without doubt, UAE is one of the crucial partners for India. That is the reason why we have elevated this relationship in 2017 by signing the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement. The Crown Prince of UAE was invited as the chief guest for India's Republic Day parade in 2017, and we elevated the relationship to the strategic level, and today both countries have built very strong economic, strategic and security ties that defines this relationship. Just let me take you through other important aspects of the relationship as well. What really signifies the growing strategic ties between India and UAE is the position that UAE has been taking with regard to Pakistan. Traditionally, UAE and Saudi Arabia, both the Sunni powers, they have been very close to Pakistan. They are seen as very close allies of Pakistan. They have constantly given diplomatic support to Pakistan at all platforms, be it United Nations or Organization of Islamic Cooperation, etc. They've often stayed away from criticizing Pakistan for sponsoring terrorism against India. And they've also provided a lot of financial support to Pakistan since many decades to support and sustain its economy. So traditionally, UAE has been a close ally of Pakistan along with Saudi Arabia. But in the last 13 to 15 years, we see a dramatic shift in their policy towards India, in favor of India. After the Riyadh Declaration was signed between India and Saudi Arabia in 2010, UAE and Saudi Arabia together have shown a policy shift towards India where they are often supporting India's position with regard to Pakistan-sponsored terrorism and even over the Kashmir dispute. For example, when the Uri attacks happened and when the Pulwama terror attacks happened, these countries, they sympathized with India and they defended India's right to carry out preemptive surgical strikes and air strikes. This was a very big shift. Previously, these countries would never take such a position. But in the last 15 years, we have seen a very big transformation taking place. They have become very close partners in the field of counter-terrorism, particularly after the Mumbai attacks, after the 26/11 Mumbai attacks. The United States, which is a close ally of UAE and Saudi Arabia, has put a lot of pressure on these countries to work with India in the field of counter-terrorism. That is to share intelligence and tackle the threat of terrorism. Because Pakistan had often used these West Asian countries as a base to target India through its covert proxy war. So in the last few years, these countries have been helping India to target terror groups like Lashkar-e-Toiba, Indian Mujahideen and the others. And counter-terror cooperation has really increased in the last few years. And even when Pakistan would try to internationalize the Kashmir issue by bringing them up at UN or OIC to target India, previously these countries were supporting Pakistan. But in the last 13 years, you are seeing a very big shift where UAE abstains from these votes along with Saudi Arabia, which is a signal towards supporting India's position. Is that clear? At platforms like OIC and UN, these countries were supporting Pakistan's resolutions on Kashmir, which would internationalize the issue and allege that India was committing human rights violations in Kashmir. But these countries of late are helping India by abstaining from such votes, by taking a neutral stand on the Kashmir issue. And this is a very big shift, and it signifies the close strategic relations between India and UAE. We also have a number of military exercises between the two sides. We have the Desert Eagle, which is an exercise between the Indian Air Force and UAE's Air Force. We also participate in a multilateral Air Force exercise called Desert Flag, which is organized by the UAE. So in the military domain, close relations have developed along with joint exercises, training. We are also looking at defense trade to procure weapons from UAE and maybe jointly develop defense technologies as well. Recently, India, France and UAE have launched a maritime partnership exercise just last month. I mentioned this yesterday as well while talking about India-France relations. Last month, a trilateral maritime security initiative has been launched, focused on the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea by these three countries. In the field of technology as well, be it space, critical emerging technologies, in all these areas, India and UAE are collaborating together. Because just like India, UAE is also a hub of startups and technology-based companies. So in the field of space cooperation, ISRO is helping out UAE to launch its satellites into orbit. Then in the field of critical emerging technologies like 5G networks, artificial intelligence, etc., India and UAE are collaborating together. And the biggest development in the relationship was the signing of a free trade agreement last year known as the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. India signed an FTA after a very long time because India had a very bitter experience with FTAs, especially with the ASEAN group with Southeast Asian countries. As a result, India had stayed away from signing FTAs for almost 1 decade. The last FTA we had signed was with Japan in 2011. So after a gap of nearly 11 years, India signed a bilateral FTA and this was with UAE. This will boost bilateral trade and it seeks to provide duty-free access to almost all the goods that are traded between the two countries. Almost 80% of UAE's exports to India will enjoy preferential access and 90% of India's exports to UAE will be given duty-free access. The goal is to take the trade relationship to $100 billion by the end of the decade. And this will benefit labor-intensive sectors in India such as gems and jewelry, textiles, leather, engineering, automobiles and pharmaceuticals. all these key sectors which are labor intensive, right, they will benefit. India's exports to UAE will increase, and thus it will create lakhs of jobs in India. So this is the kind of relationship that the two countries have built, and it's no wonder that Prime Minister Modi has visited the country 5 times during his 10-year term. So during yesterday's visit, a very, very important agreement has been signed, and I would like to point this out and bring this discussion to an end. India's RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, and the Central Bank of the UAE, they have entered into a MOU, they have signed a memorandum of understanding that will promote the usage of local currencies for cross-border transactions. That is, the Indian rupee will be made acceptable for transactions in the UAE, and UAE's dirham will be introduced to promote cross-border transactions with Indian traders. It will primarily benefit importers and exporters. Indian importers, exporters can benefit by using the Indian rupee to carry out the transactions. Similarly, UAE traders can use the local currency, the dirham, to settle cross-border transactions between the two sides. Now, this is a very, very significant step because this will help in increasing the circulation of the Indian rupee in the Gulf region. Is that clear? I hope you know that the Indian rupee is not fully convertible yet. It's not fully convertible on the capital account. So these steps that India has been taking, where we are promoting settlements in local currencies instead of relying on the US dollar, and where we are integrating our digital payment systems like UPI, these initiatives by India with countries like UAE will provide more acceptance for the Indian rupee for settling cross-border transactions. This becomes extremely important because right now India has been struggling to pay for Russian oil that we have been procuring. We have bypassed the Western sanctions. We have bypassed the US dollar, but paying for Russian oil in Indian rupee has not been sustainable because Russia can't make use of the Indian rupees as it is not fully convertible. So now India is being forced to pay in Chinese yuan. Indian oil importers are being forced to pay using the Chinese currency for Russian oil. So this could become a dependency for India. It could become a strategic weakness for India, as India would depend on Chinese yuan to pay for Russian oil imports. So one of the alternate currencies that India is looking at to settle payments for Russian exporters is by using the UAE dirham. So going forward, if the rupee dirham cross-border transactions are enabled, it will allow Indian importers to use UAE's dirham to settle payments for Russian oil exporters. That will be a huge advantage because it will allow India to not rely on the Chinese currency, which comes with its own geopolitical disadvantages. Along with that, the two countries are signing an agreement to interlink their payment and messaging systems. The messaging system between banks and the digital payment gateways, including the UPI, they will be interlinked, and they will also enable national card switches to provide for mutual acceptance of domestic cards. That is, debit and credit cards will become more acceptable in UAE, and similarly, the same benefit would be extended to UAE as well. This will primarily benefit the citizens, the Indian diaspora, and the traders. They will derive the benefit, and it will help in improving our economic relations going forward. Is that clear? The Indian community in UAE, they will stand to benefit through the integration of these payment services. And by settling cross-border transactions by using local currencies, traders will benefit. And it will give us an advantage to not rely on the Chinese yuan and pay for Russian energy imports by using the dirham. So that is the significance of this agreement which has been signed. It will enhance the trend of doing business in local currencies, which has picked up, especially since the Russia-Ukraine war. It reduces our dependency on the dollar-dominated system. The two countries have also signed an agreement to establish IIT Delhi campus in UAE. This is another important agreement which has been signed. Is that clear? Right now, Indian universities led by IITs are reaching out to foreign countries to set up their foreign campuses. Recently, a very important agreement was signed to set up IIT Madras off-site campus in Tanzania at Zanzibar, which is a strategic island in the Indian Ocean. So IIT Madras will open a center at Zanzibar in Tanzania. So similarly, IIT Delhi will be setting up its first offshore campus in UAE. So for this, an agreement has been signed. And finally, the two countries have also discussed climate change related issues, because currently UAE holds the presidency for COP28. This year's climate change summit, that is COP28, Conference of Parties 28, will be hosted by the United Arab Emirates. So Prime Minister Modi has interacted with the President designate of UAE, who will be chairing COP28 summit in December 2023. So India has shared its views and opinions, and India and UAE are going to collaborate in the field of clean and renewable energy as well as part of their climate action efforts. So these are the big developments that have come out of Prime Minister Modi's visit to the country, and hence the topic is extremely important. So with this, I complete my detailed discussion of India-UAE relations. I hope you guys have understood all the key points. Now let's move on to the next article, again from page number 1. And even this is from international relations. In fact, today we have a number of articles from international relations. This article on page 1 deals with the topic of illegal migration from India towards the Western developed countries. Generally, when we use the word illegal migration, we often refer to illegal migration that happens into India, because India receives a lot of illegal migrants from neighboring countries like Bangladesh, Myanmar, etc. And this issue has become a very sensitive and even controversial issue in India. For example, the large inflow of illegal migrants from Bangladesh was one of the triggers that led to insurgencies in Northeast India, in Assam and in Tripura in 1970s. It directly contributed to security problems in Northeast India. The constant flow of illegal migrants from Myanmar as well has enabled organized crime and Northeast insurgency. So India has often been a victim of illegal migration, and it's quite interesting to note that Indians also, they migrate illegally to other countries, to other developed countries, particularly the Western countries. So let's elaborate on this topic, as it could be very important for your mains examination. In the last few years, there have been many disturbing reports coming from US, Canada, Mexico, the Caribbean region, and also from multiple European countries, including UK, Austria, France, Germany, and even Australia and New Zealand. From all these countries, there have been many disturbing reports in the last 10 to 15 years or so that Indian illegal migration has jumped quite significantly into these countries. So first you should understand who exactly is an illegal migrant. How are they different from a refugee? You should be very clear about these terminologies. See, a refugee, according to international conventions and international law, a refugee is someone who is running away from a country in order to save their lives, because there is a direct threat to their lives if they remain in that host country. There could be a civil war, there could be a genocide or an ethnic cleansing campaign being conducted by their own government. There could be a communal conflict going on where one community is targeting another, or rampant ethnic violence, or even natural disasters. So any individual who gives up their own country and enters another country in order to seek asylum, which is to save their lives from direct threats, they might be facing persecution, they might be facing targeted violence, or their lives could be under threat due to any reason, including natural disasters. So such people who enter another country asking for protection of life, asking for asylum, they are refugees as defined under the 1951 Refugee Convention. India is not party to it. India has not signed the Refugee Convention or the 1967 additional protocol to it. But still, this is the globally accepted definition, that refugees are running away to save their lives. So every country has an obligation to save and protect refugees and grant them asylum. It's seen as part of basic human rights under the UN Charter, under the Refugee Convention, and also under the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Under the UDHR and UN Charter, this is seen as a part of basic responsibility of any UN member to protect the lives of refugees, because they're running away to save their lives. Whereas a migrant, on the other hand, if you're just referring to a migrant or illegal migrant in particular, they are people who are crossing over into another country illegally, primarily to improve their standard of living. They don't face any threats to their lives. But migrants or illegal migrants are entering another country through the illegal route. See, migrants can enter a country legally as well, right? That is by procuring the visa. Let's say you want to study in a country like US, or you want to work in a country like Australia. If you fulfill their visa immigration norms, if you fulfill their legal requirements, if you have the right education, the right skills, and enough money in your bank account, right, you will be given a legal entry into a country, which makes you a legal migrant. But those who do not meet those standards, those who lack the education standards, those who are not financially well off, right, those who are not skilled enough, they are motivated to enter other countries, developed countries, illegally through illegal routes in order to get a better life, to find a better job, to improve their standard of living. Is that clear? Illegal migration is always driven by that. Be it Bangladeshi illegal migrants coming to India. They're coming to India for a better life, right? And they take the risk of crossing the borders illegally into India. Similarly, a lot of Indians, the numbers are quite significant. Lakhs of Indians, they try to cross over into other developed countries as they seek a better life and a better livelihood. Now, of late, this is becoming a challenge. It's becoming an increasing challenge as these countries have taken note of this serious development. Just look at the data presented here. 1.49 lakh Indian illegal migrants were detained since 2019, according to US border data. Illegal migration from India to US has jumped. It has doubled in the past few months. US border patrol authorities have caught thousands and thousands of Indians who have tried to enter the country illegally. Is that clear? They try to enter through the Mexico border. This is a very risky route that they take. Or they enter Canada as a tourist, and from the Canadian border they try to cross over into US. Or they enter the Caribbean region, from where they take the sea route, the risky sea route, to cross over into US. All the routes are extremely risky. And you find that people from two particular states, Gujarat and Punjab, from these two particular states, people from rural areas, particularly farmers and few poor families, they have been taking this risk to cross over into US and other countries illegally. Now, they themselves cannot do this. They take the help of trafficking agents who specialize in human trafficking. Please remember, human trafficking is an organized crime. It is linked with other criminal activities as well. So, in Gujarat and Punjab, a disturbing trend has come up where these trafficking cartels are operating at the grassroots. At the village level, they have a network of agents who contact farmers, they dupe them, they convince them to seek out better opportunities in US or in other countries. People also from Gujarat and Punjab in general, because of their historical entrepreneurial spirit and seeking out better opportunities in other places, they tend to migrate out of the country. This has been a very long tradition in Gujarat and Punjab. Even since ancient medieval times, you find Gujarati traders in the Gulf, in East Africa, etc. Right? Even from Punjab, there has been migration since many decades, in fact, a couple of centuries at least. So this trend has always remained. The idea of reaching better countries and establishing a better life for themselves. But now this is becoming more serious and dangerous because entire families are carrying out a risky journey where they might even lose their lives. There have been multiple incidents in the past few years where many people from Gujarat and Punjab have lost their lives by trying to illegally enter into US and other countries. I can give you some examples. There was one individual from Gujarat, a poor farmer. He took the help of these human trafficking agents and he tried entering US from Mexico. And because of the harsh terrain and conditions, he lost his life. Then there was an entire family from Gujarat, including small children. And they tried crossing over into US via Canada. They got caught in a blizzard, and in this extreme condition, the entire family was killed. All the 4 people got killed. There was one more incident where, again, a family from Gujarat, parents and their adult children, they entered Canada as tourists and they tried to take the boat, they tried to take the water route to cross over into US. The boat sank and all the family members died. So there have been many such incidents where illegal migrants from India are either getting caught or they are losing their lives. And those who manage to sneak in and enter, they are creating an issue in the diplomatic relationship as well. For example, Austria, UK, they are deeply concerned about rising illegal migration from India. That's why they are pushing India to sign migration and mobility partnership agreements. Recently, we have been signing these mobility and migration partnership agreements with these countries so that they can keep track of illegal migrants, and if they detain them, it allows them to deport them back to India. So the menace of illegal migration, which is enabled by these human trafficking networks, has become a challenge in our diplomatic relationship. All right. So why do people take this risky journey? They even spend lakhs of rupees on it. They pay 50, 60 lakhs to these trafficking agents to smuggle them into these countries. Now the question is why? Why do they take the risk? Why do they spend so much money on it? The reason is they're looking for a better livelihood, a better standard of living, right? That is what drives illegal migration. So please pay attention to this problem. It is an emerging issue, and definitely UPSC might focus on this topic. Now moving on, we have an important article from page number 11 dealing with polio, the deadly polio disease. So let's talk about this article in detail. Let's understand the topic in detail. First, let's understand what is polio, what are the risks, how it can be tackled, and what is the article focusing upon. I'm sure many of you know that polio is a viral infectious disease caused by the polio virus family. There are 3 main variants which cause the disease. You have wild polio virus type 1, type 2 and type 3. These are 3 different strands of polio viruses found in the wild. So this viral infection is quite deadly. It especially affects infants and children, particularly under the age of 5 years. And it compromises the nervous system and even leads to a deadly paralysis. In fact, the symptoms are very minimal. Once infected with polio, the person, the small kid usually displays very minimal symptoms like nausea, headache, fever, etc., which is completely ignorable. But if it is not addressed, or if the vaccination has not been done, the virus can cripple the nervous system and lead to a paralysis, particularly of the limbs, hands and legs, which are crucial for your motor abilities. They could be crippled, thereby crippling that individual for life. When this happens at a young age, right, the entire life of that person is ruined. So it's a deadly disease. It could be fatal as well. If the paralysis occurs in muscles which are critical for breathing, that is muscles linked with your cardiorespiratory system and other critical parts linked to the brain as well. If paralysis occurs in these areas, the condition could become fatal as well, resulting in death. This deadly virus primarily spreads from person to person through fecal and oral route. There are chances of it spreading from contaminated water and food as well, but it does spread from person to person through the fecal oral route. So, since children are primarily affected and it has a lifelong impact, it is extremely crucial not just to tackle this disease but to eliminate this entirely. So that is why countries have taken the fight against polio very seriously along with the World Health Organization. It's not possible to prevent the disease, but there is no cure. That's what I meant to say. Of course, through vaccination, through immunization, you can prevent the infection from happening in the first place. But once infected, there is no permanent cure to polio. Once paralysis sets in, it will be a permanent paralysis, a permanent disability. So the best option here is prevention. Prevention is better than cure. And for prevention, you have vaccines available. Immunization is available, and you have two types of vaccines primarily. You have an oral polio vaccine, which is administered orally through the mouth. This is the preferred route of vaccination for children, especially in developing countries. As it is easier to administer, oral polio vaccines are the most preferred weapon for immunization against polio. Is that clear? So it's mandatory for institutional deliveries to ensure that the infant is immunized at the right time period. You also have an injectable polio vaccine, which is part of the universal immunization program that is administered with the DPT vaccine that covers diphtheria, then pertussis and tetanus. So we have two types of vaccines, oral and injectable as well. So when it comes to India and its fight against polio, India was very badly affected, especially developing, underdeveloped countries. They have taken the bigger impact of polio. So the World Health Organization declared a global initiative back in 1990s to eradicate polio completely. It came out with a global polio eradication initiative launched in 1988 and scaled up the initiative in 1990s. Developed countries very quickly managed to eliminate polio because of their improved healthcare system, because of their ability to produce vaccines and administer vaccines. They could easily manage to eliminate polio completely. Is that clear? Also, in developed countries, you have better sanitation, better hygiene. And as a result, polio was very effectively tackled in developed world. But developing and underdeveloped countries continue to suffer for many more years. In fact, even today, there are few countries like Pakistan, Nigeria, Afghanistan, which are still affected by polio. But India has achieved an incredible feat. Through its effective immunization program in coordination with WHO, India has become polio-free since 2014. For 3 consecutive years, there were 0 cases in India. The Pulse Polio campaign had succeeded in tackling the wild polio virus in India. The last case detected was back in 2011. Is that clear? So India has managed to eradicate polio, at least the wild polio virus. Understood? Now, the concern of the article is with regard to vaccine-induced polio. This is the concern of the article. To tackle wild polio virus, the oral polio vaccine which was developed, it contains an active virus to train the immune system. Is that clear? The orally administered vaccine that deals with type 1, type 2 and type 3 polio viruses, it contains an active strain of the virus to tackle the wild polio virus, to build up the immunity, to fight against the pathogen. But unfortunately, these vaccines, that is orally administered vaccines which contain a activated strain of the virus, they can contribute to vaccine-derived and vaccine-associated polio. This is the concern here. Vaccines administered orally which contain the active strain can result in vaccine-derived polio virus and vaccine-associated paralytic poliomyelitis, which has become a concern in developing nations like India. Is that clear? Developed countries have not faced this problem because they largely relied on injectable vaccines, because they had the infrastructure to store the vaccines, distribute them, administer them. But in developing countries, underdeveloped countries, the problem is they have relied on the easier option, which is the oral polio vaccine, which is responsible for vaccine-induced cases of polio. In 1988, the World Health Assembly, the top decision-making body of the WHO, called for global eradication by 2000. But this goal was altered to eliminate only wild polio virus. Is that clear? The WHO goal was changed midway in 1990s to target only wild polio virus that is spreading in the wild. And there has been no global attention paid to vaccine-derived virus and vaccine-associated polio. So countries like India, countries like Pakistan continue to suffer from this impact, and there are few cases coming up every now and then. Even though the cases are very minimal in India, it does represent a risk. That is why the writer says administering such oral polio vaccines, which contain the risk of giving the infection, is unethical. It is an unethical practice. Developed countries, they have conveniently switched over to inactivated polio vaccines, which are usually given through the injectable form. It's only developing, underdeveloped nations that rely on the oral vaccine, and some of them that contain the active virus poses a risk for polio infection. That is the focus of the article. There is a serious side effect associated with oral polio vaccines, and the worst part is that there isn't enough data collected regarding vaccine-induced polio cases. Even at the global level, the Global Polio Eradication Initiative does not report on such vaccine-induced cases. Even at the national level, the government of India does not count and does not account for these vaccine-induced cases. Many of these cases are slipping through the radar. They are not being accounted for, and this is highly unethical according to the writer, because today we have other forms of vaccines available. You have vaccines which contain a deactivated strain of the virus. You have injectable forms of vaccines available. But still, governments continue to rely on oral vaccines with active strains because it's easy for them. It's easy to roll out the immunization. That is why the writer is calling this as an unethical practice and is calling for an end for the usage of such oral polio vaccines. Is calling upon India and the world to switch towards complete eradication of polio, including the vaccine-derived variants. So that is what we should understand from this important article. It's relevant for your prelims and also to an extent for your mains. Now coming to the last big article in today's newspaper, we have this article on page number 12 that refers to the latest NATO summit that was held a few days back. It focuses on the expanding membership of NATO and tries to address the question whether Ukraine will be admitted as a member of NATO. So let's understand this article and this topic in complete detail. As you know, NATO, or North Atlantic Treaty Organization, it's a military alliance of Western countries that was established at the start of the Cold War. After the Second World War ended, by 1948, a rivalry had emerged between Western countries and the communist countries. So Western countries led by US and West European countries, they aligned together. They signed the Washington Convention in 1948 and established the NATO as a military alliance to collectively defend themselves against the Soviet power bloc, which represented the communist countries. So NATO has always been this military alliance, and Western countries have always pushed for its constant expansion to include new members from Europe and other parts of the world as well. This grouping, this military grouping, is at the very center of the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. One of the prime reasons why Russia attacked Ukraine was because of the proposed membership of Ukraine into NATO. Russian President Putin has made this clear many times that Ukraine being given NATO membership is a red line for Russia. That is the threshold. If the threshold is ever breached, then Russia will retaliate. In fact, last year when Russia attacked Ukraine, the prime reason was the growing proximity of Ukraine to Western countries and a potential membership to the NATO grouping. So, just few days back, the NATO summit was held at Lithuania on the 11th and 12th of July, and some key developments have taken place. Turkey, which is one of the key NATO members, it is the second largest military force of NATO as well after the US, it has finally lifted its block for allowing the membership of Sweden into the group. Sweden is all set to become the latest member of NATO after Finland. See, after Russia attacked Ukraine, there were tensions and fears across European countries, and even neutral countries like Finland and Sweden, they applied for NATO membership. And recently, Finland has been admitted as the 31st member of NATO. Sweden's application was pending because Turkey had placed a block, and during the latest summit in Lithuania, Turkey has lifted the block which allows the accession of Sweden into NATO, and very soon you might see this happening. Once all the legal formal processes are completed, Sweden might become the 32nd member of NATO. So now the question is about Ukraine. What about Ukraine's membership? Western countries had instigated Russia for many years by constantly pushing the eastward expansion of NATO. But now, Western countries are wary. They know that if Ukraine is included into NATO, then it invokes the doctrine of collective defense, which is the very foundation of the NATO grouping, which means technically all NATO members will be at war with Russia. So to avoid that possibility, NATO countries have tried avoiding Ukraine's membership into NATO as of now. But instead, they have promised long-term military support for Ukraine. In the last 1.5 years, they have given financial support amounting to billions of dollars. They have supplied weapons, military training, and intelligence support to help Ukraine fight back against the Russian invasion. But they have stopped short of accepting Ukraine as a NATO member. Is that clear? This has been the primary issue. But NATO countries are currently not interested in accepting Ukraine as a member, given that a war is going on between Russia and Ukraine. In fact, for Ukraine, the promise of membership was made way back in 2008 during the Bucharest summit. Ukraine and Georgia, both the Black Sea countries that share land borders with Russia, they were promised membership into NATO. It was part of the eastward expansion of NATO which was going on. But back then, Russia made it very clear that any inclusion of Ukraine is a red line and a direct threat to Russia, and Russia is going to retaliate. These tensions escalated until 2014, which led to Russia capturing the Crimean Peninsula and even sponsoring a separatist war in eastern Ukraine. Now this finally has culminated with a full blown out war as Ukraine was getting closer to a NATO membership. Now, as of now, other NATO countries like let's say US or West European countries, be it France, UK, Germany, none of them are interested in admitting Ukraine because of Article 5 of NATO, Article 5 of the Washington Convention. This is the article that provides for the principle of collective defense. It means if one NATO country is attacked by a non-NATO country, all the NATO members will treat this as a collective attack on their own country. And they will organize collective defense of the NATO member, which means all NATO countries agree to go to war against a non-NATO country if a NATO member has been attacked. Now this is an unviable position for Western countries. Even though they were trying to instigate Russia over the last many decades by expanding NATO towards the east, they have stopped short of admitting Ukraine because now, especially since Ukraine is in a state of war with Russia, if Ukraine is admitted, according to Article 5, it means Ukraine can invoke the principle of collective defense. which means all NATO countries technically will be at war with Russia. So to avoid that direct confrontation between major nuclear powers and to not allow that kind of escalation to happen, NATO is unlikely to include Ukraine as a member, at least as of now, at least when the war is still active. But Sweden might be admitted very soon. Finland has already joined. And this map over here helps you understand the eastward expansion of NATO over the years. Initially, NATO was limited to Western countries which were rooted in democracy and capitalism. But over a period of time, especially as communism weakened and Soviet Union collapsed, right? In Central and Eastern Europe, many countries have been added into NATO. Former communist countries like Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary, they were all Soviet allies. They all joined NATO following the end of the Cold War. Other major East European powers, including former Soviet republics like Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, they've all joined the NATO. Even Balkan states like Montenegro, North Macedonia, these Baltic countries, all of them in Eastern Europe also have joined the NATO. This marks the march of NATO towards the east. This is what has threatened Russia, and Russia's primary issue has been the constant expansion of NATO and also the European Union. So Ukraine's membership of NATO and EU was the main point of contention which triggered Russia and led Russia to target Ukraine, right? So given that, it's impossible, at least as of now, for NATO to consider Ukraine's membership. So that is the outcome of the latest NATO summit. All right, Turkey has lifted the block to admit Sweden, and Ukraine's membership is on hold. It's unlikely to happen because no NATO country wants to be in a direct war with Russia. All right, but they have promised long-term support, military support, to help Ukraine to fight back against the Russian invasion. So this completes my detailed discussion of all the big articles, and now we enter the smaller articles which are more prelims oriented. We have an article on page number 1 that refers to a very important government scheme, that is Ayushman Bharat and the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, which is a key component of Ayushman Bharat. According to the article, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare and the National Health Authority, which is implementing this important scheme, artificial intelligence is being deployed to tackle fraud cases in Ayushman Bharat. So first let's understand what is Ayushman Bharat, what is Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, and then understand the relevance of using artificial intelligence to detect fraud cases. See, Ayushman Bharat is a flagship healthcare scheme of the Government of India, which was recommended under the National Health Policy of 2017. It aims to provide universal health coverage to Indian citizens, and there are two main components. You have Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, which is essentially an insurance program, and you have health and wellness centers, which are physical health and wellness centers coming up across the country to deliver quality healthcare. These are the two main components of Ayushman Bharat. Under the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, which was launched in 2018, universal health coverage is provided, that is, insurance coverage of 5 lakh rupees per family per year is being extended so that they can access secondary and tertiary healthcare even in private hospitals as well. Is that clear? It has essentially upgraded the previous insurance schemes such as Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana. These erstwhile schemes which limited the beneficiaries, this scheme has been upgraded into Ayushman Bharat, the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, where there is coverage given to the entire family of up to 5 lakh rupees per year for secondary tertiary treatment, not just in government hospitals but also in private hospitals as well. So in this insurance scheme, lot of fraud cases have been detected. Either patients or some middlemen, corrupt government officials or hospital authorities, they have been fudging the records. They have been falsely admitting patients or creating false records to claim insurance amount. So to arrest these fraud cases, the National Health Authority, which is the implementing agency, has started deploying machine learning tools to detect these patterns and identify the fraud cases. Right now, the government of India is working on Ayushman Bharat digital mission to make this program entirely digital and to bring all the healthcare data on digital platforms. So as part of the digital drive, the government is using artificial intelligence and machine learning tools to fish out these fraud cases, these fake entries and admissions that are taking place. And up to 0.18% of hospital admissions under Ayushman Bharat have been determined to be fraud cases. Further, Aadhaar-based biometric verification is also being introduced to authenticate the patients through their biometric details. When patients are admitted and discharged, right, capturing their biometric details is mandatory right now. So through such methods of governance, through innovative methods of governance, the government is trying to tackle fraud cases in Ayushman Bharat. Next, page number 7. We have an article referring to India-France relations, which we discussed in detail yesterday. Yesterday we spoke about the topic in complete detail. Of course, I'll not repeat that. But there is an update. There is a very important update. According to the update, the joint statement that India-France issued has been revised. This is quite interesting. Remember, I told you yesterday that India-France have finalized few important defense deals, which includes joint development of a combat engine. Both countries were looking to jointly develop a fighter jet engine. They were looking to expand the Scorpene deal so that Indian Navy could procure 3 more Scorpene diesel electric submarines from France. And there was a proposal for 26 Rafale marine fighter jets for the Indian Navy. These proposals had been approved as well by the Defence Acquisition Council. But at the last minute, the joint statement has been revised and there is no direct mention of these deals, which means the deals are yet to be finalized. Maybe with regard to pricing or maybe with regard to transfer of technology, some issues have come up and at the last minute, both sides have put off the agreement. So they have revised the joint statement and it does not contain any confirmation regarding the 3 Scorpene deal, the deal to procure 3 additional Scorpenes or the deal to develop a joint fighter jet engine. Alright, these references have been dropped. But however, it does refer to a joint roadmap for the Indo-Pacific. India, France have launched a development fund through which they will finance sustainable projects in Indo-Pacific region. This is a very, very important initiative because as I told you yesterday, France is a major Indo-Pacific power. France has overseas territories in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, which you can see here in the map. Alright, please make a note for your map-based questions, for your geography questions in prelims. This could be very important. France has overseas territories in Western Indian Ocean, such as Reunion and others. And France also has a very strong military presence in this region. The French Navy is actively deployed here and France has military bases all across Western Indian Ocean. Then in New Caledonia, next to Australia, and in French Polynesia, even here France has few overseas territories and multiple military bases where the French Navy and Air Force have a strong military presence. This makes France a major military power of the Indo-Pacific and naturally India collaborates with France to strengthen maritime security across the Indo-Pacific. Alright, so these are the places where France has overseas territories. In Western Indian Ocean, around La Réunion or French Réunion, around New Caledonia and French Polynesia. Please make a note of these locations. Next, on page number 9, we have an article referring to the G20 Sherpa meeting, which is concluded at the historic city of Hampi in Karnataka. As you know, Hampi is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's a key architectural landmark dating back to the Vijayanagara Empire. And at this historic town, the G20 Sherpa meeting had been organized at a luxury 5-star hotel. All the G20 Sherpas have met to iron out the final issues before the final summit is held. As India is holding the chair of G20, India will be hosting the G20 summit in September, where all the prime ministers, presidents of these 20 countries will be visiting India and engaging in dialogue to talk about economic issues, geopolitical issues, etc. So to assist the countries to reach a common point, to lead the negotiations, to set the agenda, under G20, something known as Sherpa arrangement is available. Every country appoints a Sherpa. See, Sherpa is a Nepalese term. Sherpa is someone who guides mountaineers who are trekking and hiking in the Himalayas. So just like a Nepali Sherpa guides mountaineers, similarly G20 Sherpas, they guide their respective countries to achieve a common point in G20 negotiations. From India, it is Amitabh Kant, a very well-respected bureaucrat, former head of Niti Aayog as well, right? Amitabh Kant has been appointed as India's G20 Sherpa. So every G20 member will have their own Sherpas, and they are the lead representatives representing their country. So at the G20 Sherpa meeting, they tried to work out a common ground so that a final statement can be brought out at the G20 summit. But the contentious issues between Western countries and Russia and China has created a divide, and they have failed to come to an agreement. Russia, China have formed one bloc, whereas Western countries have formed one bloc. Western countries want Russia and China to be targeted for their aggression, for their tensions that they have created. But Russia wants a debate on the impact of Western sanctions on the global economy to take place. So because of this divide between these countries, there has been no conclusion at the Sherpa meeting. But they are hoping that by the final summit in September, they will be able to iron out the differences and come out with a joint declaration statement. As the host, it is India's responsibility to guide all the conflicting parties towards a common viewpoint. So that is why the Sherpa meeting was very important. So just know what is the role of a G20 Sherpa. A G20 Sherpa represents their country, helps in planning, negotiation, implementation, and coordinating the agenda, and they lead their countries and guide their leaders, ministers and prime ministers and presidents. They guide them regarding G20 negotiations. Next, on page number 10, we have a couple of interesting articles regarding some developments in Pakistan. It's quite interesting, quite ironic as well. When I first read the statement, it was quite shocking, right, and quite surprising as well. Pakistan has said that its neighbor is not behaving according to international law. It seems like a statement India would make against Pakistan, right? But our dear friend Pakistan has now made a similar statement about Afghanistan. Just like India points out that Pakistan is sponsoring terrorism and sheltering terrorists, now Pakistan has made a similar claim against the Afghan government, which is ruled by the Afghan Taliban. Because see, Pakistan has used terrorism as a weapon for decades together. It has waged a covert war against India by using terrorism and by fueling religious fundamentalism. Today, Pakistan itself is suffering from the impact. Any country which breeds terrorism and fundamentalism is bound to suffer from the impact. Today, there are terror groups like TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. It's the Pakistan faction of Taliban. And it has close links with Afghan Taliban. As you know, Afghan Taliban has captured power in Afghanistan. In 2021, it toppled the Afghan government, and Afghan Taliban has formed the interim government in Afghanistan. It shares close links with Pakistani Taliban, that is the TTP, which is committed to overthrowing the Pakistani state. And Pakistan Taliban reportedly has found shelter across the Durand line, across the Pakistan-Afghanistan border in Afghan soil, in Afghan territory. And Pakistan has been complaining that Afghan Taliban is not acting against the Pakistan Taliban. Last year, a ceasefire had been worked out. Afghan Taliban had mediated between Pakistani government and TTP, and a ceasefire had been arranged. But TTP has broken the ceasefire last year, and it has started carrying out major attacks against Pakistani troops. It has killed multiple Pakistani forces. It has carried out attacks against civilian targets as well. So TTP today has become a major threat for Pakistan and its very survival itself. Similarly, there are few other groups like the Baloch groups, Baloch militants also operate in Balochistan and also in parts of Afghanistan across the border. So all these groups have stepped up their attacks against Pakistan, and hence Pakistan is blaming Afghan Taliban for sheltering and for giving refuge to these terrorist organizations. Now this is quite rich coming from Pakistan, because this is exactly what India has been saying, that you guys are sheltering terrorists, giving them a safe haven, and now Pakistan is raising similar concerns, and it sounds pretty ironic. Pakistan has been a state which has constantly backed fundamentalist activities, extremist activities and terrorism as a part of its state policy. Right? Religious minorities have suffered in Pakistan, be it Buddhists, Christians, Hindus, Muslims as well, Ahmadiyas, Hazaras, Shias, and even Sunnis who don't follow the rigid version being promoted by these extremists. They're all targeted in Pakistan, and you have evidence right over here in this other article where Ahmadiyya mosque belonging to the Ahmadi community has been targeted by radical extremists. So Pakistan today is becoming a victim of terrorism because it's paying the price for the fundamentalism it has created as a part of state policy. It has misused religion, twisted religion, given it a wrong interpretation for the sake of geopolitics, and now Pakistan is paying the price. So that is an important takeaway from these two articles on page 10. Coming to the last article for today, on page 11, in the Science and Technology section, there is a reference to CRISPR technology. CRISPR-Cas9 is a gene editing technology. When it came out a few years back, it was a revolutionary technology as it allows for precise genome editing. Is that clear? In genetic engineering, this was a landmark breakthrough because through CRISPR-Cas9, specific segments of DNA strands could be cut and desired features could be introduced, thereby revolutionizing the world of genetic engineering and genetic manipulation. Through CRISPR-Cas9, you can create plants and organisms, animals and even human beings potentially with desired characteristics by carrying out precise changes in the genetic structure. So this article here is referring to the usage of genetic engineering such as CRISPR tools to produce better wood fiber. Wood fiber is used in various applications to produce tissue paper, to produce fabric, textiles, packaging material, etc. It's a very important industrial product. Currently, wood fiber production has been affected because a key component, that is lignin. Lignin is a complex polymer, organic polymer present in plant tissue, which provides rigidity and structural integrity to plant tissue. If you have to produce paper, fabric and textiles from wood fibers, then lignin has to be cleaved, it has to be broken and dissolved in order to produce the fiber through wood particles. But the composition of lignin in different plant tissue affects the quality of the fabric which is produced and the paper which is produced. So experts are looking at options where they can use CRISPR technology to genetically edit the lignin component and ensure that better properties are added to make it more suitable for the industry, to produce better fabric and paper for the industry by using wood fibers. Alright, that is the takeaway from this important article. So this completes my detailed discussion of today's newspaper. I hope you guys have understood every single topic. Please take up these questions for your mains answer writing practice, and also head to the Telegram channel because we have a quiz on some of these topics that will help you revise these topics again. I hope you guys have liked the session. Do let me know through your comments. Share the video with other aspirants and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So that is it from my side. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again tomorrow. Till then, take care and have a great weekend.